This is Keyed In with Max and Brent, unlocking the minds of the industry's top real estate professionals. And now, here are your hosts, Max Rabin and Brent Jackson.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Keyed In podcast. I'm your host, Max Rabin.
And I am Brent Jackson.
Today we have Alan Zuschlag from Washington Fine Properties. Alan is out in horse country, Middleburg area in Virginia. Alan, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So we actually had Brad Capel on recently, who is a heavy hitter out in the Annapolis market, the secondary home market, we like to call this. I'm sure you have a lot of people from this area looking out there all the time, so we want to learn more about that kind of market.
Yeah, that's pretty much my bread and butter. I would say 75 to 80% of buyers in my area are DC metro looking for a weekend home and or retirement home.
Yeah.
Can you define horse country? I know Max mentioned that, but like some of the newer agents might not think of where horse country is.
Yeah, well, it has different names now. Now it's wine country too.
Wine
so
country.
It's it's kind of morphed a bit. But basically, anything from Loudoun County down to Charlottesville in Albemarle County is considered hunt country, or horse country if you want. And it was basically centered around the fox hunts in various locations, and they sort of established it as a place to be for fox hunting. But then other equestrian sports developed too, and when Jackie Kennedy was out there hunting, and the Mellons and everybody else, that kind of put the place on the map. So you have Middleburg in the north, Loudoun Fauquier County, and then Charlottesville in the south, kind of in Albemarle County. But everything in between is considered hunt country. Like all real estate, location. There are certain locations within that that are more desirable. But the interesting thing to see in the past 20 years is the development of the wine industry in Virginia, and how that is driving things as the horse industry actually fades. We sold some big horse farms in the past, and we're not finding any buyers wanting a big horse farm anymore. In fact, Newstead Farm, which was a big farm, had 118 stalls. We had to bulldoze more than half of those just because nobody wanted them. It's a different era. So there's still a very strong horse presence there. Fox hunts are still very strong. It's still a lifestyle that resonates with a lot of people. But in terms of the big farms that raised, the big Kentucky Derby winners and so forth, they're all moved to Kentucky, or they're in New York or Florida, and not so much in Virginia. In fact, I've got a farm coming on this spring that a Kentucky Derby winner was born on, and that's part of its provenance in terms of advertising it, but really that's not going to attract the buyer.
Mm-hmm.
That legacy, not so much anymore. So it's changing, but it's becoming more wine country for sure.
So just in general, so if you're selling a horse farm, are there already active horses on there? Are you selling the horses with the property?
Oh gosh, no. Usually it's So a lot of our, we're a destination market in that, for better or worse, nobody needs to live there, right? So if you're moving because of, old age, divorce, lifestyle change, or something like that. It's not a job-related thing. And conversely, if you're coming to that area, it's because you want to be there. It's a discretionary kind of purchase. And so if somebody wants a horse farm, it's because they're bringing their own horses in, and somebody's selling a horse farm, they're taking the horses somewhere else. So you're selling the facilities more than anything else. But it's not just horse farms. Any kind of property out there is a little bit different than in town, in that you've got a lot more moving parts in terms of outbuildings and barns, fencing, all that kind of stuff, whether it's horse or something else, or even vineyards. You've got different things to worry about. So it's a different mix of things.
So that was my next question. Does it hurt your buying pool because you shrink the market? Because if you have 118 horse stalls,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm an end user that don't have horses, but I love the 100 acres and the beautiful
Right.
home, I don't want to maintain these 118 stalls and everything associated with it. Does it help or hurt
To have those stalls there?
to have the stalls?
Sometimes it hurts, I guess in terms of, the facilities. There's a lot of people that, especially younger buyers now, it's no longer aspirational to have the big country spread, right? The younger money from Wall Street or high tech want something turnkey. They want the downtown loft, or maybe the place in Aspen and the jet to go with it, or the yacht. They don't want, a vast country estate. So in some ways, those are a bit of a white elephant in today's market because the younger buyers want something a little more compact that they can come and go and not be tied down to it. So yeah, it's a bit of a liability. On the other hand, there are still people that want that lifestyle. And we're very fortunate to have a lot of people in the countryside to support that. So the people that can run the farm for you are all in place and they want to stay. And so usually it's a very smooth transition with a new owner. We just have the numbers in front of them and say, this is what's going to cost you to operate this, per year, or this is how much income the farm generates to offset your operating costs. And it's pretty straightforward. But that is the one hurdle if a buyer's coming from DC and has dreams of country life, but has never picked up a chainsaw in his life, right. Or whatever, and doesn't know how to, do that yet. That is the hurdle that most people have to do. It's super easy, and that's my job actually to help guide them and help them over that hurdle. But it is there.
I was going to ask that. It's like, well, first of all, how did you get started in real estate? Have you always been selling out in the countryside?
No, I could bore you with the long tail, but it started right around the corner here on 1906 R Street. You know those townhouses with the gas lights right there? Yeah. So they were rental units at the time, and I fixed up my rental unit, and I fixed it up a little too well. So when the building sold, they kicked me out, let all the rest of the tenants stay in the place, and I vowed I'm never going to rent again. I'm going to own if I'm going to fix this up. And my neighbor across the street was Wallace Tutt. And so
one of the founders of our company.
Right. So Wallace bought a house on 21st Street that he was going to renovate. I bought a condo on 19th Street that I was renovating. And we had a lot of fun. We traded back, work tips. He gave me some extra crown molding, and things like that. And he had said at the time, Alan, this is so much fun. We ought to quit our jobs. He was a lawyer in the DC government, and I was a government official as well. And you ought to get your real estate license, and we should go into business together. And I looked at him and I thought, you've got to be crazy. I'm throwing away my, education and everything else, career path to be, I was very dismissive. It's like a shop clerk, they're folding jeans at the Gap, they're sitting in open houses, whatever on Saturdays. No, I'm not doing that. And,
exactly.
And to my detriment. So we got Jonathan Taylor and then Michael Rankin to do it. So, we went way back. But flash forward a few years, I'd finished renovating my condo and it was time maybe to move up to a house. And my friend Bill Moody had just come down from New York and had just gotten his real estate license and was sleeping on a friend's couch. And I basically gave him the listing. It was his very first listing in my condo. And he had an open house.
Just curious real quick on that, interject. Why Bill Moody versus, I don't know if Wallace Tutt, did he have his firm at that point?
He did not at that time.
Okay.
It was still in form. He hadn't even bought Swan House yet or whatever like that. So, but it was in the mix. Okay. So, but I hired Bill as, gave him a break, friend from New York, and he had an open house. And I came at the end of the open house. He said, "Go around the block. I've got a bidding war going on in here." So I came back an hour later and found that he had sold it above asking price. At the time, it was a small little condo, but at the time it was the highest price per square foot in DuPont Circle. So we were really worried that it would, praise out. So that was kind of I've always been adjacent to the business and known all the players because they were all friends. I've known Mark Loam since day one, since the first day he moved to town and everything. We all used to run together in a pack, and so there was a fair real estate component. Matt McCormick, all those people, we all go way, way back. So when it came time to sell my house in DC, I had Bill Moody and Patrick Chauvin, they were a team at that time, sell that. And I moved to the country. And I figured, I was working at the World Bank at the time, traveling a lot, had a little apartment in town, but really fell in love with the country. And the next thing you know, my 25-acre weekend home became a 125-acre farm, and I was raising sheep. And I was getting disillusioned with traveling the world, and living in hotels. And I thought, I want to be on the farm full time. How can I make that transition? And
you just do it.
I just had all these real estate friends. And I thought I could sell farms. So I got my license, called up Tom Anderson, who at the time was in New York, still running Sotheby's, but he was managing the Middle Atlantic region. And I had said, who's the Sotheby's affiliate that I should hang my hat with? Because it was Frank Hardy in Charlottesville and Armfield Miller and Ripley in Middleburg. And I was right between the two. And he thought about it a bit, and he said, well, you should go with Armfield, Miller and Ripley. So I very arrogantly, freshly minted agent, never sold anything, went up to Armfield, Miller, Ripley and said, you need to hire me. And I think, in fact, I know it was because of my connection with Tom Anderson that they said, okay. But it was a strategic move on their part, because at that time, Little Washington and Rappahannock County was really getting on the map, and they wanted to secure that as the Sotheby's territory. So I opened up the office in Little Washington. Was happy as a clam. Had my own little office. I could commute to the farm in 10 minutes, and life was good. And so I started that way.
Wow,
basically.
That's an awesome little town too, in a Little Washington.
Yeah.
Or the Washington.
Right.
Curious, like a timestamp. So when you sold your first place in DuPont Circle with Mr. Moody, there was multiple offers. What was the price?
$70,000.
Wow, 70,000.
Yeah, for a one-bedroom condo, which was
totally renovated.
Fully renovated, which was unheard of at the time. So I immediately bought at 15th and Corcoran, which was a very sketchy neighborhood at the time. And we had, all kinds of drug deals going out the front door and things like that, and renovated that. And the market immediately crashed. It was the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, and the market was dead in the water for a while in the early 1990s. So when I had Bill and Patrick selling it, I was the worst seller you could imagine. I mean, all the, what are you doing for me? How come this hasn't sold? All the things you hear all the time.
Well, how long did it take to sell?
A year and a half.
Okay, that's a long time.
Yeah.
Some sellers it took 3 weeks, and I was irritated.
Well, this was a whole different.
A year and a half is different.
Now it just sold last week, I guess. Sammy Dweck in your office.
Okay. I toured that house.
Yeah, 1.6, which I thought was really cheap. It sold above asking, but
it was semi-detached, right? Because there was no home on the
just the end
east
of the row,
side.
and
There was apartments on 15th
they
Street.
Changed some of the stuff that I had in. I think
it was still nicely done. You did a good job with that house.
So it's changed hands, I guess, a couple times since then.
So going back to Hunt Country, talk about a little bit how things have changed since 2019. What was the market like before the pandemic? Did things take a long time to sell, or tell us about what the market was like?
Yeah,
then?
that's a really good question. So I always used to rail against my city colleagues, because you have it so easy. You just you open up, put on the sign, and somebody brings you an offer, and that's you're done. We were kind of like that when I started out in the early 2000s. The market was really robust, and prices were rising significantly. And then the downturn in 2008, 2009 came, and it just stalled. It was like a Mexican standoff, because we're a discretionary market, and we're a market with a lot of wealthy people that don't need to sell, right? And a lot of wealthy people that don't need to buy, And so the sellers suddenly saw this market downturn, and there was no price adjustment for a long, long time, because they just said, well, here's my price. I'm not going to lower it. And the buyer said, well, I'm not paying that price. It's a new world. And so I'm caught in the middle with all the marketing expenses and no sales. So it was a really rough patch, I'd say probably till 2012 even.
Wow.
So the market's recovered, here in town fairly quickly, bounced back. There it was slow going. And we're still not today, even 12 years later, not at the same price point we were in 2007.
What?
So
Wow.
it's still undervalued market overall, I think, compared to everywhere else, which has seen price appreciation way, way, way beyond those times. So it is a steal in a lot of ways. The property out there compared to the city. I mean, you can buy, a decent sized house on decent acreage for the size, the price of a broom closet in Logan Circle. So there's a huge disparity. That has changed post pandemic. We had the exact same rush you did, probably even more so, because people wanted to get out of Dodge, right? And our market has traditionally been people my age that are empty nesters or thinking about retirement, and they no longer have to worry about kids in school and so forth, so they can move to the country and enjoy their life there. During the pandemic and post-pandemic, we've seen a huge shift with younger people saying, why are we in Petworth, right? If our kids are about the age to go to school, and we don't want to move to, suburbia, we can work from anywhere thanks to the internet. Why not move to the country? So seen a huge influx of younger people, younger families, which is a good thing. It's balanced out our market a lot.
Yeah.
So,
I've met a few of these families who living, decently in the city, and they
Mhm.
don't. Yeah, they want to just take it a further step from
Right.
suburbia
yeah,
to go full rural.
yeah, exactly. I
You
mean,
know?
it's cool to be downtown, but it's cool to be in the country. It's not so cool to be in, Manassas,
We
right?
were having this
So,
conversation. I forget which agent we were talking about the other day about like the suburban life,
Mhm.
and it's basically just sitting at intersections,
Right.
all the time.
Yes, and it
So-
takes 20 minutes to get anywhere.
right,
Yeah,
right,
Essentially,
right,
it's
yeah,
red lights, stop
yeah.
signs to get to the gas station, to get to the grocery store, to your Taco Bell or
Yeah,
whatever your
yeah.
food of flavor is.
So yeah, we're seeing a huge shift in the demographics of the buyers. They're no longer older, reaching retirement. It's much younger, much more diverse. Super huge gay community out in Rappahannock now and other places.
So,
That
sorry, these buyers, these younger buyers, is it their primary residence or it's their second
it's
home?
becoming primary residence.
Their primary.
sometimes. Yeah, yeah. Still there's a fair number that are second homes. They're still DC based for some, for a good part, but there's a huge cohort that would look at, say, well, we're not into boating necessarily. We're more into hiking and climbing and dinner parties with friends or whatever like that. And so the allure of the Eastern Shore or Annapolis, which is more water focused, is not that great, and they'd rather come out to the west, to the mountains. You've got the scenery, you've got world class restaurants, you've got all kinds of fun stuff, wineries and things like that. So a lot of people think, well, if we invite our friends out for the weekend, there's lots for them to do. Let's look there as opposed to say there or the Delaware shores, which are that much even further away and gotten so expensive as well.
Right.
So there's a sweet spot that's our bread and butter, and that's DC based mostly.
So of these newer money buyers who are entering the world of like the hunt country, what is it like the typical type of product that they're looking for? Like 100 acres might be a little bit to take on.
Yeah.
But
So
what is a good
Does it come with a
selling?
lawnmower?
that's a really good question. So I am when I get a call or whatever from somebody, well, we're thinking about a place in the country, and I say, well, give me the blue sky version. How do you imagine it? And it's all pretty uniform when they're sitting in their cubicles on K Street dreaming of the country life. They want acreage so they don't see their neighbors necessarily. They want a little bit of open fields. They want a stream or a pond. They want mountain views, and they want to be near nice restaurants or a winery.
And
or
like Bambi walking
and
around.
Bambi walking along.
Yeah.
And that's what everybody wants. And the truth is, you can find it. So everybody's got a different idea of acreage. They'll come to me and they'll say, well, we're thinking, 10 acres, as if that's, whatever. And I said, you're not going to be happy with 10 acres.
It's so small, right?
You're going to, trust me, you're going to grow into that property. You're going to outgrow that property so quickly. You want more. And during the process of looking around, they quickly realize that there's actually advantages to having more acres. It's oddly enough, it's cheaper to maintain because then your property is big enough that a farmer will, make hay on it or run his cattle on it, and he's not going to do it on 10 acres and so forth like that. So it's a learning process as people make that step. I used to do back about 5-6 years ago when we opened our office opposite the Diplomat there. I used to do little seminars for city people that were interested in maybe country life.
City folk.
Yeah, just what to expect, kind of thing. And it was very interesting to see that the expectations, because I had done the same exact path, were still the same. It's still coming from the city, moving to the country.
So do you have to? I guess you have buyers coming looking for second homes. Some people want just the water. Some people want just the mountains or the
Right.
rural life. Do you have some people that are whatever is the best deal for me? I could go 2 hours to the shore and go 2 hours down.
Yeah, I do have. I've worked with buyers in the past that have done that. They've basically drawn a 2-hour radius outside of DC and said, we're looking everywhere, but we'll look with you out here, but we're also looking there.
That sounds like me.
Yeah, and I think the more it's an iterative process. The more you look, the more you sort of discard certain areas like, no, that's not for us, or yeah, this is for us. Let's focus on that. So we've had a lot of people do that over time. I'm a complete chauvinist of where I live, and so I obviously want to get them to where I am. But a lot of people will say we just like the water better, so we're going to do that. And there are some people that'll come out, you know, in their Maseratis and, you know, stiletto heels and whatever, and I'll look at them and said, you know, who let you past Warrenton? You know,
Right.
you're not going to be happy here. You know, but most people, they've been out there hiking in the Blue Ridge. They've been out to wineries before. They've been out to the inns or the B&Bs, so they know what they're getting into. Or at least they have a fantasy of what they want to get into.
So I'm sure you've sold properties over the last couple of years. Talking about the pandemic market, people who are like, we want to get out. We want to make this big change, and we want to be in the country.
Right.
What are some mistakes you've seen people make? Like they bought something with you, and they're like, you know, Alan, like we want to buy this house. You're like, sure, and you show it to them, you sell it to them, and they call you like 3 months. They're like, hell did we just do?
Yeah. So I have to say, not to toot my own horn, I have not had that problem with anything I have sold. However, there are some other agents that have sold properties, and I get the call now from the buyer saying, I think we made a mistake. You know, can you help us sell this?
So you were the listing agent going into it.
No,
just
buying
in general.
something else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
So one of the things that, you know, I think is what I bring to the table in terms of selling for city people. Not only have I done that myself, you know, made that transition, but I'm very good at hand-holding and in managing expectations about what country life is, what they're going to do. You know, you can, where I live, find 27 different varieties of extra virgin olive oil, right? But you can't buy a box of Cheerios to save your life. You've got to go, you know, 20 minutes away or 30 minutes away to a grocery store, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of things that people take for granted that moving to the country you don't necessarily have right there. Medical facilities, this or that or whatever. You know, there's a fair amount of preparation you have to do, and you know, also with dealing with the land and everything else, and land use taxation versus residential taxation, all the kind of things, a lot of moving parts. So most of my business in town, if they don't call me directly, is referrals from TTR or WFP or somewhere else, or Compass, you know, saying, hey, I've got these clients, can you take care of them? And I'm happy to do that. It's a really reciprocal relationship between town and country. But it's a lot of agents in town don't have the time to come up to speed on all that stuff, you know. So it's easier just to refer it out.
Yeah, I had a client who they owned a kind of odd lot farm in Leesburg, and I just didn't. I was like, I can't. I'm like, I could certainly make a few trips a month out there to deal with it, but it was not my cup of tea.
Yeah.
It was kind of rough, to be honest, the way they had their land. They had some farmland, and then they had like a pond. I didn't even like walking around out there. I'm, you know, wearing my city shoes. I showed up in the wrong shoes, basically.
Right. So that is a really good a part of my business is the relationships I have with in-town agents. So, you know, if Daniel Hyder calls me up and says, hey, I've got, you know, somebody who's on the Redskins that's looking for a place in the country, can you take care of them? I'm happy to do that, you know. Or somebody else says, I've got this client, they've bought and sold, I don't know how many houses, you know, in Colorama, and now they're looking for a country place. Can you help them out? And it works out really, really well, you know, for both our businesses in terms of that. And there's other people that, you know, have a big farm in the country, and then, you know, I've got clients that bought a big farm, and they're saying, you know, we enjoy the country so much, we need to sell our house in Tracy Place. Who should I talk to? You know?
Right.
So it works both ways.
Absolutely.
There was one thing that Brad Capel, the waterfront guy, mentioned on our show, and it's like there's so much waterfront on the Eastern Shore, deep and shallow waters and whatnot. And from my understanding, like the novice person looking into hunt country, like the zoning and land usage, which you mentioned a few minutes ago, like you've got to have a savvy buyer agent because you don't want to buy a 10-acre, what you think is a farm, right next to something that could be redeveloped into 300 townhomes.
Exactly. So you kind of have to see there's certain areas that are just protected by zoning that are going to stay that way. Others that aren't, that, you know, it's paradise now, but, you know, it could be the next ex-urban, you know, kind of strip mall in several years. So yeah, you have to be careful where you step your foot. And it's also, you know, in town, people want a new house because their family's growing, so there's a time element, or they've got a new job, so there's another time element in terms of moving and so forth like that. Again, in the countryside, because it's a discretionary buy, there's no real, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? There's no time element in terms of searching. They can take the time to look. Now that changed during the pandemic when there was this, you know, incredible, you know, feeding frenzy or whatever like that they had to make a decision right away. But most of my buyers, and I'm used to it as the agent, there's going to be a lot of tire kicking and a lot of thinking. And on bigger farms, it's de rigueur to have a 60-day study period or whatever, just to look at that, interview staff, figure out all these things. So it's not a quick transaction.
Are there any building restrictions? Meaning, in DC, you've got to stay within, especially within this historic, you've got to stay within a certain style, so to speak. But out in Virginia,
it varies from location to location. So, and each county has its own zoning in different areas too. So, Western Loudoun County is completely different zoning than Eastern Loudoun County. Same with Fauquier and so forth. Like Rappahannock, which is kind of the most restrictive on the East Coast. One house per 25 acres. That's it. Really, really restrictive. And there's restrictions on how you can divide properties and so forth like that. And then there's certain towns that have their own restriction, like Middleburg has, an architectural review board. Little Washington does too. So you can only use certain materials, certain colors. It's all got to be approved, that kind of thing. But the other thing that's kind of nice about it, if you find a nice big chunk of land that's your own and you're away from your neighbors, you can do pretty much whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So it gives you a lot of freedom that way too.
Yeah, my question was sort of piggybacking on that. Obviously, there's a lot of tech money and tech use going into like Loudoun County and Fauquier County. But have you seen any like spillover of that like further out into the countryside?
Yeah, not as much as I had anticipated. When Amazon's putting their headquarters here, and a lot of other Fortune 500 companies have put their headquarters in the DC area, and those executives need to blow off steam on the weekend somewhere nearby. Mm-hmm. And so we are, for better or worse, or I guess I use the analogy, we're the Napa Sonoma of DC as opposed to San Francisco, or not quite the Hamptons of the area, but it's kind of that mix. The place that's an hour and a half outside the city where you can go and have what you want. And so I expected we'd have more of that. I think the ability to work remotely has kind of changed that to some degree, but in our favor. Mm-hmm. But it hasn't been the sort of new executive class coming to DC and wanting a weekend place right there. I think because their worker bees are still working everywhere, there hasn't been that. I don't even know what's happening with Amazon right now.
Right.
But when Nestle, all these other places, we'd see the executives want to look out that way.
What do you see as your biggest market competition? Whether it's the Eastern Shore, the Greenbrier, Deep Creek, or somewhere like Florida?
I don't know that we have. I'd say it'd be the Eastern Shore if I had to, for that reason. We get a lot of, 75% of our business is DC based, but the other 25% is from all over the world. So we had a lot of people even before the pandemic coming from California, wildfires in Napa and mudslides and everything else, and just we can come east where it's green and the climate's nice. I got a lot of overseas buyers. I just sold a large farm to some Chinese people that wanted a place where they could actually own land, and were thrilled to pieces to actually own, part of Virginia history. They thought was great. We've always had a fairly substantial European population in the Hunt country just because of its history and so forth like that. So it gets a broad range, but and they want to be there as opposed to say, upstate New York or Connecticut or whatever.
Right.
But did they look at those places like the 25% you mentioned, like from Europe, California, what have you? Are they looking also in upstate New York or New Hampshire, Vermont?
Not so much. So I had buyers recently that just bought a place in Middleburg. They're in Ocala, Florida, and Woodstock, Vermont, and they were deciding, Woodstock's fine in the summer, but it's just too cold in the winter, and Ocala's too hot in the summer, and they were supposed to flip them, whatever, and decided neither was right. They'd rather have the in-between Goldilocks just so. And so they started looking up and down the Eastern Seaboard for the right place, contacted me to look in Charlottesville at first, and we were looking around there, and then they decided Middleburg was more to their liking, and the climate was right, and the horse facilities and everything like that. So they pounced. I had a Brazilian billionaire that I thought was going to buy the Mellon estate, which would have been perfect, and he didn't in the end, but he was looking, he raised racehorses in Europe and in South America. And his problem was taking racehorses from South America to Europe. They're not only changing hemispheres in terms of seasons, going from winter to summer, but they're also got 8-hour plus jet lag. So he thought, I need a place in North America. It's on the same time zone
Right.
as my South American operations, but different seasons, right? So I can shoot my reason. And then from Europe to America, it's the same season, but it's different time zones. So he flew his jet, which is the same jet that the Mellons have, right onto the airstrip. I thought, this is perfect, fit. But he decided at the end that Kentucky was better for him, for where he wanted to be. So, but I think on the whole, if they're DC based, it's a natural 2-hour outside the city. This is our limit. We'll look here on the Eastern Shore. That's where you see the debating. Otherwise, from elsewhere, they're focused right on that area.
Before we were started recording, we were talking about the Salamander Resort, which is in the Middleburg area, which is a large attraction for people from DC.
Mm-hmm.
And they have, it's like, tell us about the development there and like the kind of like the pricing, whatever you know about it. I know it's not your listing, but tell us what you know about it.
So yeah, we were given a tour, early on with their goals and their plans and everything like that. And it's nicely done, quality construction. I mean, everything's really, really well done. But quite frankly, I just don't see the appeal at the price point. And you're getting, an outsized suburban lot in a development, really. So there's nothing really country about it, I guess. But for people that just want an escape and don't want a lot of maintenance, they offer, a lot of amenities right there. And I'm actually surprised that it's been selling as well as it has been. But
I guess there's some brand recognition too.
There is
some.
It's got not only the Middleburg name, but the Salamander that they know already too. So, and that's what they've leveraged in this whole thing. But I haven't sold a single one. Most of my clients, they want something. They want their own piece.
They want the real thing.
Yeah.
Do they ask about it? Like, do you have buyers that come in and it's like it's something that you show them, and then if you look at that for $3 million, they come over.
So I've had a couple buyers come to me and say, well, we looked at the Salamander and we decided it's not what we want. So we need somebody to show us, to find what we do want, something different. And so it's more reaction against that. I haven't had buyers say, oh my gosh, this is perfect for us. Let's look at the Salamander. It's been mostly the opposite.
Tell us about some hidden or not so hidden gems in your neck of the woods.
In terms of
like, what's like a place that you might go to, whether it's like it's hiking or a restaurant or something that's your favorite?
Okay. Well, we're completely and utterly spoiled. I mean, I live in an area where I can be mucking around in the barn and knock the mud off my boots and go to the Castleton Theater, world-class music. Lauren Mazel was the conductor that, bringing people from around the world, had a music festival there. I can go to world-class, restaurants right around the corner. It's hard to get in these days, but there's a couple where I can go that, that I know, and you can have, the most incredible meal just right there in the neighborhood. And then there's the scene of beauty. So I'm big on the Shenandoah National Park. White Oak Canyon is a place that a lot of people don't know. They know Old Rag, which is what brought me out there when I first came to DC in 1978. I went hiking out there and said, this is incredible. But White Oak Canyon is pretty special. It's a cascade of waterfalls coming down off the mountains and various little pools and things like that. You can hike up and then swim down if you want, kind of thing like that. So it's the right combination of, I think, natural beauty and fine living in terms of eating and drinking. There's a couple stellar vineyards. The Virginia wine industry is still getting its legs. I've sold to a couple Californians who are anticipating the wine market expanding, but it's not quite there yet. But there are some world-class wineries. RDV does a phenomenal job of producing wine. Linden Vineyards does another good job. Chester Gap is another one. So there's some really world-class talent.
Where do you live? Like which?
So I live in a place called Amosville.
Amosville.
Which is right by Fauquier-Rappahannock line.
And is it spelled A-M-I-S?
AMIS, yeah.
Oh, okay.
You can call it a Misville
Yeah,
too.
because I've seen some properties over there. And I
Mhm.
think there might be one on the market now that's it's a lot of acreage. I just remember looking at it.
Yeah. So we've experienced a bit of a downturn since June, I guess, slowing down a bit. But then beginning of the year, it's just picked up. I've had my best month ever in January, which is traditionally a dead zone for us. We're very, very seasonal, spring and fall. I wish I had 10 months of October, because that's when all the buyers, come to the country and want to look at properties. But yeah, it's been crazy busy now. There's, like in the city, there's just no inventory.
So what do you attribute, I mean, the inventory, but what do you attribute your busy January to?
That's a really good question. I keep stopping and thinking, is this just a fluke, or is this a sign of an overall robust market? Because again, we're a discretionary market, so we get hit hardest and lasts longer. And the fact that I did, I think, 12 million in January.
That's good.
And for the country, it's pretty incredible, I guess, to do that much right away. And it's hard to say. I mean, it was people that were looking before, right? So it wasn't they were on January 1st coming out and saying, hey, we want to look. But there was a decision that was made. Now, all of them were cash deals, right? So they're not interest rate related. But also the buyers that I'm working with that are, sort of focused on interest rates, they've come to kind of accept the new normal, and rates have actually blipped down a bit. So that isn't the sticker shock that it was back in June, when you lost all your money on the stock market and interest rates had more than doubled and gas prices were through the roof. So why am I leaving Georgetown to go out in the country, and drive an hour and a half? That's kind of evened out. So right now, the problem we have is lack of inventory.
Yeah, that echoes, excuse me, that echoes kind of what we're dealing with here too. Yeah. And we, business picked up really nicely in January. I don't know if you've had a little lull as of the last couple of weeks, but it seems to have chilled a little bit in some regards. But
it's chilled a little bit. But I've been telling people, I mean, it's the lack of inventory. The rates have gone from 7 to 6. To your point, the sticker shock is now off, and then the weather's been great. I mean,
the
it's been
fantastic.
Such a mild
60s
winter
in January and February.
Isn't that just so weird though? It's just, you think about that, a mild winter can really affect people's psyche.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
unbelievable.
It truly is. It truly is. And I both love and dread, really nice fall weekends. I just know I'm going to get these calls, and I'm booked up a week or so in advance, and it's really difficult to tell people, I'm really sorry, I can't take care of you today. But it's true. People wake up and say, today's the perfect day.
So what do you do in that situation? I'm just curious. That person calls and says, I want to go look at property. Do you give them to somebody else?
I try to, if they're willing to do that. I'm pretty much a lone wolf. I don't do teams, or I hate doing co-listings. I like to run my own shop from soup to nuts. And so, I'm a bit of a control freak, and I want to manage that, that client's search. So most of the times, if they're coming to me, they'll wait for me. But a lot of times, if they're just picking up the phone and thinking about it, I'm happy to give them to somebody else in the office that wants to take care of them.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. You kind of answered the question. You don't work on a team.
Yeah, teams are not so popular in the country.
Okay.
But there are some, and there's some that people do co-listings just because the distance is involved, going from here to there or whatever like that. It's nice to have somebody, opening the house up for you while you're showing them something else or whatever like that. But again, it's just my own kind of style. I'd rather manage it myself. It's just one less layer of phone calls, texts, whatever that I have to do to somebody else to report into somebody else, in terms of a team member or whatever like that, make sure everybody's on board. And it's just, if I've only got to report to myself,
So if you take a vacation, do you have someone to fill for you?
No, I have to be I don't take vacations, I guess, basically.
He's on vacation.
He's on vacation.
The last time I took a vacation was I went to New Zealand for a month, and that was right before the pandemic. And I had to key everybody in and let them know, and whatever. But you can generally, January and February traditionally in the countryside are dead zones, as is July and August. So you can generally plan around that a little bit, but that's the tough one.
You mentioned earlier maybe showing something in Charlottesville and then going all the way to East or West Loudon. That's a very large geographical area.
It is, and each with its own sort of kind of intricacies in terms of septic regulations or whatever like that. So there's a steep learning curve, to have that kind of geographic range. But I felt it was worth it. One, because I want to do it. I don't mind the driving. There's audiobooks I can listen to. But my second point was that buyers, until they narrow their focus, they want a wider catchment area because they have this amorphous idea of hunt country. Where is that?
Right.
Right. And so part of the process is going with them and sort of narrowing it down into localities they do like.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a bit of a hassle, but there's never any traffic, so it's not a stressful hassle in terms of.
You get behind a tractor.
I do that too. I on country roads, you do get behind a tractor or a school bus, and then you.
But that's the charm. That's part of the charm.
Yeah,
Unless you're in a hurry to get
unless you're
somewhere.
in a hurry. Yes, exactly.
You're not
Tractor's
supposed
going
to be in a
15.
hurry, Brent.
Yes,
Yeah,
you're in the country.
Right.
So.
You mentioned earlier cash deals. How many? Do you know the percentage of cash deals in DC? It's depending on the time of year. It could be 1 to 4 or 1 to 5 in deals are all cash.
Right. So I'd say about half are cash. They're kind of in 3 tranches. There's younger or I guess single income kind of people that really need to get a mortgage to make this happen, but can afford to service a mortgage for a second home, so they'll do that. A lot of the buyers that we used to have, the traditional buyers that are people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, have enough cash assets that they can pay cash for the second home. They're dual income professionals from DC. I've had a lot of people from DC that have maybe even paid off their mortgage in town, or it's substantially lower than the house value. They'll just put an additional mortgage on the DC house. It's much easier to finance than country properties, and they can get a regular conventional lender to lend on that, whereas they can't in the countryside. Their minds explode if anything's above 5 acres, and so so we've had a lot of that. But the rest of the market, I'd say, 2 million up, has always been cash.
Mm-hmm.
Even though when interest rates were so low, a lot of them they would finance anyway because money was just so cheap.
Yeah.
Why not? But they were structured as cash deals.
So in DC, a term sheet it's not abnormal to see financing, appraisal, home inspection in our contracts.
Yeah.
I mean, is there anything, do you see those in your contracts?
All the time,
Okay.
all the time. Yeah. And so we even in the feeding frenzy, we did kind of get to the DC, no contingency kind of thing, but Virginia wants you to have drinkable water, right? So there has to be a water test, and almost inevitably there's septic and whatever like that. You can kind of slide on the home inspection, but they're built into the process, as is a study period, on a larger property with multiple buildings and so forth like that. So it's very rare that things close within 30 days. It usually takes twice that long just to satisfy all those kind of things.
Is there anything that we didn't ask that we should be asking you?
No, I can't think so. I mean, Brad covered a lot of the territory in terms of the buyer profile and things like that. And
So did you. So yeah.
It's a great market. I think it's undervalued compared to our feeder market. So it looks like an immense value, and it truly is, given the previous price points that we have yet to recover to. So I think I always tell my buyers that when you're looking for a country home or a second home, first and foremost, it should be fun for your family. That's why you're doing this. But secondly, it should be a really good investment, because it's not your primary residence. Things may change. You may decide a couple of years down the road or whatever that you're moving, you're doing something else, and you're going to have to get rid of it. Let's make sure you find an area where it's going to increase in price over time, and do really well, so that you're happy when you have to give it up. And that resonates with a lot of people, because a lot of people it's a step that they want to take, but they're a bit nervous about it, right? Because it's adding more responsibility, adding more kind of things. But if it's couched in the terms of not only satisfying those needs, but also a shrewd investment, it works. In fact, I've had just in this past year, and I should have followed their lead, any number of finance clients who wanted to get out of the stock market and put their money in land just as an inflation hedge and everything else.
Right.
And so land, which had been languishing for years on the market, suddenly was being snapped up just as a place to park money. Sure enough, 2 months later, the stock market is, I'd lost my shirt, and I thought, wow, those guys were smart to do it.
Well, I heard something interesting about this large purchases of land by major investment houses. I think this could be totally made up BS from TikTok. I don't know.
From TikTok,
But
right? Yeah.
something about carbon credits for owning like forest land and other types of agriculture.
Yeah, there's all kinds of things. There's all kinds of, so where I live, it's the headwaters of the Rappahannock River. It's still in the Chesapeake Bay catchment area, and they're very focused on clean water and everything like that. And so it's a natural for stream bed mitigation banks.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of these environmental companies, in fact, I'm dealing with one out of Texas right now. It's buying 100 acres with a lot of streams. They're making sure that water is pristine and filtered through, natural vegetation and everything planted around there. And what they do is they sell the offsets to developers who want to destroy some wetlands to put in a shopping center down
need the
in
offsets.
Fredericksburg.
Yeah.
And so they can purchase, these credits there. So there's all kinds of schemes like that.
You heard about this,
Yeah.
Brent?
I don't watch TikTok. I'm sorry.
It's not just on TikTok.
Yeah.
It could have
You get all your
easily been a
investment advice
headline.
off of
It could have been a
TikTok.
headline in
That's all I heard.
Forbes
Yeah.
or something too. Okay, I
So-
just looking at the internet.
Yeah, I would say the other thing that's different between our two markets is that in DC you have a lot more competition, right? There's a lot more fish swimming in the same pond in the same neighborhood. So you're competing against each other. You have to differentiate yourself far more.
Yeah.
In the country, it's a little more collegial. There's less agents to compete against, but it's more of we kind of have our own niches. So buyers know to come to you for a certain type of property or whatever like that, or a certain type of service that they expect, which means my business model is completely different than yours. I mean, social media, there's none. Okay. Flyers, mailings, none. Whatever like that. It's all reputational, and it's all based on referral business from former clients and so forth. So it's a higher barrier to entry getting started, because there's no team network or anything like that. You can start out as an assistant necessarily and work your way up. There's no way necessarily for really smart, ambitious realtors to suddenly flood the market with social media stuff or flyers or whatever, or lifestyle kind of
Sounds
websites.
like it would be a waste of money.
It would be, because it's not, first of all, your target audience is in the city and all around the world, and how do you target that? Whereas, in DC, you've got your catchment area.
Mm-hmm.
Here it's global, so how do you do that? But so it's the bulk of my business comes from former clients or recommendations from former clients, from local people that have farms to sell that know me, or from referrals from DC agents that I have a personal relationship with that say, hey, can you take care of my client? And that's the bulk of our business. So in that sense, my advertising and those kind of related costs are pretty nil, in terms of a DC agent.
Yeah.
But the converse side is, unless you are have grown up in the area and really know the ins and outs of various things, it's much harder to get into. My two biggest competitors, in fact, I'm kind of constantly, checking on HomeSnap to see, who's ahead or whatever like that.
See, they're doing it out there too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, only just recently,
Yeah.
whatever. But it's actually a pretty decent product. I'm surprised that it really is kind of good. But one is the Master of the Hounds at Orange County Hunt in Middleburg, and the other is Master of Hounds in Keswick Hunt down in Charlottesville. And those are the two prestige hunts.
Mm-hmm.
And they do a great business just because of their position and who they meet and so forth like that.
Mm.
So it's much harder market for a younger agent to really get established.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people, I'm getting a little long in the tooth, but there are some that are, 10, 15 years older, and I think really you probably ought to just, hang it up, but it's more set that way, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's the main difference, I think, in terms of how you put together things.
Yeah.
That was a question that I had. You answered a lot of the points, but I'm thinking, like a newer agent that wants to get in. Again, in DC, you can throw a rock and hit an agent
Right.
in 5 feet.
Uh-huh.
And there's a lot of agents that should not be in the business. They just
Right.
got their license. They think it's easy. They
Right.
watch these shows on Bravo.
Right. Right.
Or it's a second career for them, and they're very successful before they came into real estate, and they find out how difficult it is.
Yeah.
Out in your country, Hunt Country, so what is it like to be a successful agent? Is it someone that's growing up through the channel? Is it someone like yourself that's a...
I think so. I mean, my head start was I knew all the players in DC, right? And so I had this connection, and I was hired by, a carriage trade firm out here based on my connections there. So is that an unfair advantage? Probably so. I've since been able to capitalize that based on my own skill set that I'm bringing to the table with clients. And so I would say in the countryside, if you've got a younger agent that's looking to have a career in that area, you have to have the same drive, determination that the top agents in DC have. That same extra bit of ambition, or the same extra bit of OCD, anal retentive, kind of drive to really do things. I mean, that's key no matter what. But you also have to be able to read a potential buyer and seller for that matter, and handle the psychology a bit more than you do in town, where you have a transactional relationship that lasts a short term. This is a longer term. I've had listings that have been 5 years long, and you have to think of new and creative ways of saying why the house hasn't sold last month, but so there's a not only a knowledge of the land and wanting to run around in the mucky mud, on a wet winter's day and show properties, but also being able to reassure people that their concerns, because they've never lived in the country before, are easily managed, and show them by example. So you can't necessarily move out from DuPont Circle, like I did, and say, hey, I'm going to be a real estate agent in the country, without having gone through that process kind of yourself. You really have to learn the country, get to know the people, and get to know the history of various quirks of various places. So there's a in DC, I've seen this too. There's people say, hey, this sounds fascinating, let's get into it. What a glamorous lifestyle, whatever. And for those that are really bright and attach themselves to a really good team or whatever like that, where they can learn and really advance, there's a pathway up, right? Out in the country, not so much, and so you really have to want to live in the country first and foremost, and then secondly, sell the real estate.
Makes total sense.
The agent profile, it's a little different. It's not someone that just graduated college, 22, they got their license and now they're selling.
Sounds like that would be impossible.
No, right. In fact, I'm at an age where I've been selling real estate longer than they've been on the planet, kind of, and I'm a bit jealous of their meteoric rise, but I shouldn't be, because it's done from hard work and everything like that. But it's just, I'm not in an environment where that's possible.
Right.
So there have been a couple of children of established real estate agents that have been groomed to take over the business. Sure. And some of them don't necessarily have their parents' drive and ambition, and are kind of floundering as a result. Others have made a really good go of it, But it's so that's one entry level, marry into the family, I guess, or something like that. But it's well,
even then, you still have to, like you mentioned, the drive and determination. You've got to have a passion for the job. Yeah. Just because your mom or dad did it doesn't mean that you're going to be successful at it.
Well, that's right. The other thing, though, that is I think more and more a skill set, and again, maybe that's where I'm kind of aging out, and there is room for somebody younger that's more in tune with the millennial population or whatever, in terms of their wants and needs in the country. But being able to bridge the gap between town and country is a key. And a lot of real estate agents out there don't, because they've never lived in town. They don't have the same connections in town. They don't understand the mindset necessarily of people that are used to certain amenities and certain lifestyle values, and then coming out.
Alan, I think I could do this, okay? I think I could bridge the gap. Okay, I just don't want muddy shoes. That's
right.
Okay?
That's it.
And when you said mucky mud earlier, I was just thinking, like, Brent, do they have Balenciaga?
No, you buy mucks.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah, there's a whole socio, whatever, of different styles of boots, in terms
of course there is.
You can read people in the country by their shoes as much as you can in the city. And their cars too, but it's
you pulled up in your fancy car and step out with pair of mucks and your steel chainsaw.
I'm sure there's still like, you know, Lamborghini Urus and stuff all over the place.
It's different. But anyway, that is the barrier for new people starting out, is you've got to walk the walk and talk the talk, as well as have the real estate savviness too. And that's the deal.
Alan, great stuff. Really appreciate you coming out, driving in here and meeting with us. And Brent's going to hit you with some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
You ready?
I guess so.
So what is your guilty pleasure?
My guilty pleasure? Oh, I can't believe I'm admitting this into the field. So I drive a lot just between various listings. So I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and I listen to things that are supposed to be, you know, educational and, you know, sort of enhance my knowledge of the world. My guilty pleasure is a romance novel in between, you know, just to listen to something totally fluffy and, you know, whatever. And
whatever keeps you awake in the car
exactly.
is good.
Well, that's my number 2 question here. What's your favorite romance novel?
Oh gosh, I don't have one. They're all so formulaic and stupid. You know, they all are the same. They're interchangeable. It's just, you know, background noise.
It's got the Fabio guy on the front with the girl in his arms.
But if he's listening to it, then it's on his screen in his car.
Oh yes. Do you have a favorite restaurant that you would recommend to our listeners out there?
Oh, I have favorites. One of my absolute favorites is the Blue Door in Flint Hill. Just a stunningly terrific place. They have sort of Middle Eastern, Italian cuisine, but with an American twist that is just really, really good. Right nearby is Houndstooth, which is phenomenal. Dane Smith is the chef there. He does a great job. He has restaurants in the Caribbean and elsewhere. And then, you know, there's the big granddaddy, the Inn at Little Washington.
Never heard of it.
You know, right around the corner from my office. He's opened up a newer, more casual bistro called Patios, and it is really good for the price point. It's really top notch. Right down the street from that is a place called the Blue Rock Inn, which has probably the most spectacular terrace you have ever seen. Ponds and vineyards and mountains in the back, and does a great job. It's Chef Ben he used to do Pineapples and Pearls. He's out there now.
Oh, okay.
I think Nina's leaving right after this to go to all of these places.
Yeah, they're really good. And then there's Three Blacksmiths, which is another world-class restaurant in Sperryville. And I think that's the hardest to get into. I think reservations are 6 to 8 months out. But they're all.
I'll get one.
Yeah.
I got it.
So, do you have a hobby outside of real estate and romance novels?
Well, I'm now an ex-sheep farmer. I've given up the sheep, but I garden, so I have lots of gardens.
So wait, just quick. So you had sheep. You had herds of sheep.
Yes.
Did you have sheep dogs that herded them? And
no, we had sheep donkeys, protectors.
Okay.
We still have them. Donkeys are phenomenal. So yeah, in my retirement, I could be a donkey farmer, I guess. But yeah, it was sheep. We were the largest breed stock farm of our particular breed in the country, in North America, actually. We supply breeding stock to other.
Were you yourself? Did you ever do any of the manual labor, like the shearing and all?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Well, not the shearing.
Okay.
I tried that once, and I said never again. It took me an hour and a half per sheep. It looked like a kindergartner giving herself a haircut. It was pretty messy. So, but yeah.
Anything you're binge watching on TV?
We're kind of in between binges. So if you can recommend something, we're doing. I was totally disappointed. Everybody was going on about White Lotus and whatever like that. I thought it was awful. Why should I spend 2 hours having cringe-induced anxiety, and see horrible people do horrible things? So, and the same thing with Succession, Yellowstone. We tried all of them, and it's just like
You didn't like Yellowstone?
No, it's cartoonish violence that would never happen in the real world. Yet it's portrayed with this realistic kind of grit, and I just like, oh, come on. But but what am I reduced to? All creatures great and small. I mean, it's kind of twee little, grandmotherly kind of things. I don't know. I'm looking for the next big Game of Thrones thing. What's the new one about the zombies or something?
This Is Us.
Is that any good?
The Rest of Us.
The Rest of Us.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's based on a video game, and I watched like
really?
25 minutes of it, and I was like, no, thanks.
So I need a new binge.
Yeah. I don't have anything.
Is it The Rest of Us or This Is Us?
The Rest of Us. This Is Us is the comedy on NBC. The Last of Us. Okay, Nina,
that's what it
correct.
is. Yes,
Yeah,
that's what it
I'm
is.
thinking
Sorry.
like Yeah,
Is it
I'm
good?
watching it.
Thank
The Last
you.
of Us is good.
We're
It's-
all
All right.
we are all idiots.
But it is. It's a zombie.
Yeah.
And I usually don't like the zombies. I'm
Yeah.
like, if it's
Yeah.
not real, then it's like it's. I'm not going to
yeah.
see a zombie walking out here on DuPont Circle.
well,
Some people might think
actually,
so. Right.
all right,
Yeah, but so that's the next on the list, I guess.
that's it.
That's it.
Alan, thanks a lot.
Hey, thank you, gentlemen. It was fun.
We always give a donation to the charity of our guest choice. So
Oh,
who's that?
that would be Piedmont Environmental Council.
Great stuff. Thank you, Alan.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for listening to Keyed In with your hosts, Max and Brent, unlocking the minds of the industry's top real estate professionals. For more information on selling your home, find us online at keyedinpodcast.com. Remember to subscribe to Keyed In on Apple Podcasts or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at Keyed In Podcast, at Rabin Max, and at Brent E. Jackson. And follow Max on TikTok at MaxwellRabin_properties.